Paul Eno was a regular speaker here and a good friend to many of us. He passed away earlier this year, leaving many of us shocked and saddened, especially with the speed with which the degenerative disease that he'd been diagnosed with took his life. I had the honor of introducing him a number of times, and I'd like to begin with a slightly revised version of the introduction I used to use. For more than 15 years, Paul Eno, along with his son Ben, hosted a popular CBS weekly radio show, fully syndicated, called Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno. Over time, it garnered an estimated 3 million listeners in 72 countries. Paul was among the pioneers of the theory that UFOs, ghosts, and poltergeist phenomena, cryptoids, and other areas of high strangeness are closely related. Paul served on the experiencer resource team of the Mutual UFO Network and on the research committee of the Consciousness and Contact Research Institute. Paul co-authored, along with his son Ben, Behind the Paranormal, Everything You Know Is Wrong, Behind the Paranormal 2, Bigfoot, Mothman, and Monsters You Never Heard Of, and Behind the Paranormal 3, Uneasy Skies. Additionally, Paul was the author or co-author of more than a dozen other books on paranormal and historic subjects. His final book, I believe it was his final book, Dancing Past the Graveyard, Poltergeists, Parasites, Paranormal Worlds, and God, was published in 2019. Paul came to the world of paranormal and UFO studies with credentials unlike any that any of us have ever possessed. He was one of the first paranormal investigators of the early 1970s, beginning while he was studying for the priesthood. His early mentors included parapsychology pioneer Dr. Louisa Rhine, an extremely important name in the academic studies of this non-standard topic, Friar John J. Nicola, S.J., who happened to be the technical advisor for a little film called The Exorcist, and legendary first-generation ghost hunters Ed and Lorraine Warren. Paul was expelled from seminary because of his paranormal work, with less than 2 years to go before ordination. He ended up as an award-winning New England journalist. That's hardly a fitting epitaph for a man whose life was so much more and who meant so much to many of us. I'm not going to take up a lot of this time slot, but I wanted to relate one personal memory, which came some years ago. I had an issue with a colleague that I honestly didn't know how to express or if I should. And I needed somebody whose opinion and judgment I could absolutely count on as rock solid to see if it matched my own thoughts of how I should resolve or not deal with the situation. And Paul was the person I chose. And what he said not only made eminent sense to me, it was informed by a kind of kindness and empathy and a code. Paul, more than most people, many of us knew, lived by an ethical code that was, by modern standards, hardly found in today's society. He also is one of the people who delighted me in that when we started to communicate, on camera over the years, it was usually from a special room in his home, which was a library. a rectangular room with bookcases on all four walls and not a spot for another book. I'm a big reader, but I'm also a book lover, and it just warmed my heart and backed up his tremendous intellect. I loved him very much as a colleague, as a friend, as a luminary in the work, and I will always miss him. But as it is with folks who have passed, you know, you carry them around inside of you, and hopefully you're a little more for that experience. Come on up, Valerie, and share your thoughts.
Thank you, Peter. I first saw Paul speak about 12 years ago at a library, and as I said yesterday, if you were here for my talk, I was instantly blown away by the talk that he and his son did. They talked of very complex subjects in ways that a non-scientific mind like myself could actually understand. Not long after that, Paul and his son would come to the KRI Center for Consciousness Studies in Stratham, a place that was my second home while it was open. And that would be the first of many events that he would do with us. I was lucky enough to get the opportunity to get to know Paul over the years while doing various events, whether it was the Exeter UFO Festival or doing events at the KRI Center. And then I got to work on a couple other projects with him. I got to be both a guest and a guest host on his radio show, Behind the Paranormal, with Paul and Ben Eno. And I can't quite express how much that all meant to me. I haven't had a lot of people in my life that I could look to as role models who exemplified the very best in human beings and who were also seeking understanding of all these weird things like I was. But Paul was a positive role model. As an investigator, as a researcher, as a writer, and as a person, he had an unwavering faith, but he was open-minded. He was willing to change his mind, if you could back it up, of course. He was intelligent and unfailingly kind. He was steadfast and reliable and very humble. In life, he did not see the impact he had on our community. One of the hardest things about losing loved ones is always looking back at the missed opportunities to let them know how much they meant to you. But doing the work that we do with the unexplained and the mysterious, we can take some comfort in knowing that their consciousness lives on, and what they may have not known in life, they certainly know in death, whatever death actually is. I am certain that if he didn't know before, Paul knows now how much his friendship meant to me. If you attended my lecture yesterday morning, you heard me speak of Paul's views on the multiverse theory. In that theory, Paul didn't believe that death as we know it actually exists. And I'd like to read Paul's own words from his book, Footsteps in the Attic. And it's from chapter 5, Death, the Final Frontier, with a question mark. Death, the ending of life. The entire premise of this book is that there is no such thing. Still, we cry as we watch our loved ones pass away. We bury strangers and friends alike. We watch the television news and see thousands perish. Indeed, the dead loom like living monuments over all of us. We live in nations they founded, in communities they carved out, in homes they built. We obey laws they made and enjoy the freedom they bled for. We inherit their money. Their art, music, and literature they created still touch our hearts and stir our imaginations. We worship in ways they taught because that's the way they met God. But bodily death is like money. We see notes and coins, but these are just symbols. Money has no objective reality. It, like time and death, are abstractions. They're all functions of our consciousness. People aren't abstractions, however. You're here, body, mind, and soul. What's more, your consciousness, your existence, reaches out across space-time in all sorts of facets and manifestations. But not only will you experience physical death, you're experiencing it right now in countless ways, in unknowable numbers, in unimagined universes. But not to worry, You're in plenty of other places, elsewhere and elsewhen. There is no death because there is never an absence of life. You truly are made in the image of God because in a very real way, you are eternal. And so we can take comfort in knowing that Paul is in that place. And if you heard Paul talk over the years, you also heard him talk about parasites, and one of his best ways to battle parasites and negativity was through humor and laughter. So I am going to close with a joke. What room does a ghost not need in a house? A living room. Thank you.
I'm going to keep my time up here pretty brief. Paul said it numerous times over the years, numerous times in this very room. It's the first day of school, and everything we know is wrong. We found out how wrong the situation was earlier this April with Paul. He was a good man, a mentor, a friend, and he loved being on this stage, sharing it with his son, Ben. No matter if you're outside or, using the bathroom, getting a drink, you could always tell when Paul and Ben were on stage because the sirens go off every year when they're trying to talk. There's only so many times I guess we can all say it. We're going to turn this over to Matt for a minute, let him say a quick piece. But after that, we want to open it up to you guys, and Susan, yeah. And because he loved being up here and to hear the crowd, not to feed his ego, to know he was making you guys happy. He lived for it. So can we show him one more time? Make some noise, guys. Are you or Susan? Okay. Susan, would you like to say a few words?
Good morning. My name is Susan McNeil Spooler. I'm the director of the Greater New England UFO Conference. Paul started coming to the Greater New England UFO Conference and Bigfoot Conference in 2013, and from there, he was either our keynote speaker, he was always a predominant force within the conference, would recommend speakers for us, and brought in great people. In 2020, it was his 50th anniversary in the paranormal. It was also 2020, it was COVID time. And so I was trying to invite all of the various people to attend. We couldn't have it in Leominster City Hall because they were only allowing 25 people to come in, and I knew I was hoping to have more than 25 people. So we moved it to New Hampshire, to the Wilton Town Hall Theater. My friend Dennis Markovich owns the theater. There's two theaters, and it was built in the 1800s, and it was a really funky place. So what happened was I was inviting people, Joe Citro, Steve LaPlume, Mike Stevens, Fred Richards, Colin Andrews, Jimmy Pentanito, Mark D'Antonio, and Travis Walton. None of them could or would come to the conference, so I had to have a way to properly honor him. So what I did is I mailed everyone, our conference, we always have a button like this one does, and I had 30 custom-made bow ties, tie-dye bow ties. And I shipped them to all the speakers that I had invited. And I had them make a little video homage for Ben, and then I had them email them back to me, and I edited it all together, I stitched it all together, and then we showed it on the big screen at the Wilton Town Hall Theater. And he really enjoyed that. And Linda Zimmerman also was one of them. We considered that day in October of 2020 to be Paul Eno Day. So I do have a copy of that video, and I'll post it either on his website or on the Greater New England UFO website that we have on Facebook. I did get to visit his studio in 2019, and besides running conferences for fun, I'm also a dowser. I find water for people underground. And so he and Ben had me on the show in January of 2019. That was a lot of fun. And one of the great things about Paul was one time we were here at this conference, and it was the year that it was pouring rain, and I was helping him pack his truck, and I was realizing I couldn't find my car keys. So he helped me, and we were in the pouring rain, and he looked, of course, that's Paul. He said, "Don't worry, Susan, I'll give you a ride home to Massachusetts," which was on his way home to Rhode Island. And I realized I had an extra pocket in my shirt, and that's where the keys were, so they were safe all along, but it just goes to show what a wonderful person he was. And my husband and I did attend his funeral back in April, and one of the, it was a type of, what's the word? It was an Orthodox flavor of Catholicism, and one of the things that was striking to me was, it's just a small church, and there was 3 women who sang the entire 2 hours that the ceremony was on his behalf, and then he was an open casket right there. And one of the flower arrangements, it was full of flowers, but it was also full of a whole bunch of his bow ties. It was really cool. So we always remembered him for that. And the year that we honored him for his 50th anniversary, I had custom-made combs made for him because he always needed to comb his hair. And so I made sure he received about 100 of those. So anyways, Paul, we love you and we miss you, and the conferences won't be the same without you. You were just a stellar, bless you. You were just a stellar speaker and someone who was always there for advice and for kindness, and I'll always love you. Thank you. And for those of you who are interested, the Greater New England UFO Bigfoot Conference is next Saturday, September 7th in Leominster, Massachusetts. Thank you.
Hello. I just met Paul in 2018 at the Greater Boston, as Susan just said, and was mostly just as an attendee and really learned a lot from him. Then the following year, I became a speaker, and as you can see how nervous I am now. He could see it then. He's just telling me, just relax, just share what you know, tell everyone what you told me. And then I went down to Rhode Island, was a guest in his studio on his show, and really got to know him a lot better. And such a great guy. I learned so much from him. And he shared with me an experience he had in Pennsylvania that I always wondered about, everyone's always wondered about, that I'm a Sasquatch researcher, but he confirmed to me that it's all connected. He saw both phenomena on the same night in the same area, and that was confirmation to me, because his word was gold. And I just want to rest in peace, Paul. What a great friend, and thank you.
Hello, folks. I've been doing a radio show called Spooky South Coast for the past 18 years. Paul was our very first guest on our show, and he had been doing research for many, 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 many years. And as one of our first guests, he shared a lot of information that was new at that time. You know, the paranormal research goes back as literally hundreds of years. But he was a scholar of all things unknown, and that's one of the things I can attest. him and I would have loads of discussions because we became friends after this and over the years and worked together on a number of different cases. Even though he had we'll call it a more orthodox or religious view of things, he was always, and I repeat, always open to every point of view. Now that is a true researcher, because when you research, you want to take all the information you can in and correlate it. Just because you may not feel it's what you're into, you still keep that with you, because you never know when you'll find another correlating piece. If you start excluding things, as he put it, then you're tossing out pieces of the puzzle. And that stuck with me because he's right. Just because I don't understand it or I don't have it fit into my belief systems doesn't mean the piece is invalid. And like I said, that's wise words. He spent many years looking into this. So I'm going to take the advice of somebody that's been in the game a little bit longer than me, okay? And like I said, I was co-host, guest host, I don't know, dozens of times on his shows. And he always had other people that were, the best way to describe it is eclectic views on the same show. And he was able to moderate it in a way that they weren't at each other's throats, which is hard to do in the unexplained arena, because you'll get some person that's diehard this and diehard that, and they're diametrically opposed. But he was able to orchestrate a conversation. And that's what was best about Paul. He was not only a great orator, he was also a great mediator. All right. Thank you, folks. Thank you all for helping us remember Paul. I'll only add that one of many things I'll miss about Paul was a regular feature of this conference every year until Paul got sick was a live episode of his radio show on this stage. And I mean old-fashioned radio, complete with the applause sign, audience participation. It was so much fun. And just one more thing that kind of hangs in the ether now that we don't have anymore. Let's see. Remembered Paul Eno. We are having, Mike, our time is, let's see, we're supposed to finish 11:45. We're running late. So we are having an early lunch break. Be back here at 12. No, wait. Program. Professionalism sometimes demands assistance. We finished at 11:45, but it's not even 11 yet?
Yeah, so we're gonna have to
Is
get
that a misprint or?
no, because that was a full-time slot that we just took.
So
for,
we now have a break in 12:30?
Yeah. Would anybody else like to come up and share some memories of Paul?
We have more time than we thought. Come on up.
Yeah.
But indeed, we have.
Yeah, that'll be lunch. Yeah, this just took a full speaker spot, which we probably didn't need. So it's probably just a scheduling oversight.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah. Come on up.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Martin Willis. I do a very simple show to remember, podcast UFO. And about 13 years I've been going at it. And right at the very beginning, I started to reach out to different people that were already talking about this subject. And I found Paul and reached out to him, and not even 5 minutes into the conversation, he said, "You got to come on my show." So it was he helped me launch this back in 2011. It's going strong, 600 some odd shows now. But I really appreciated everything about him. He actually one time I'm in the antiques and auctions and things like that, and he also was too. So he actually came to one of my auctions once and looked around at everything. He was really into historical objects and all that. And then I had announced he was listening to my show, and one time I announced that I had a guest house up on top of a mountain, and I was giving away like a weekend or something like that on the show. So he writes me, he said, "Boy, would that be a place I could come up and do some writing for like 4 or 5 days?" I said, "Sure, why not?" So he came up, and I don't think he did much writing because we hung out like the whole time. You know, we had a really good time, a lot of late night conversations, and very interesting guy, very kind guy, I have to say. And I always appreciated, you know, his thoughts. And I think that he had really a great idea about I forget, someone mentioned it earlier here, but everything's kind of connected. And I think that's a very big possibility because we know so little about what's going around us. But I love the fact that he explored all these things. He had, for those of you who knew him personally, he had a very rough start in life, and I think that's what kind of jolted him into doing this and getting into seminary, and then, you know, eventually going on to looking at this paranormal. But anyway, he was a great guy, and last time I had talked to him, he said that he didn't think he would be able to do his show any longer, and it wasn't long after that he was gone. So it was very sad to see that, a great loss to this. And I know he was always here and in other places, and always, like someone said earlier, always had a big smile on his face, always had time to talk to you, and he will be missed. Thank you.
Thanks, Martin. Okay, we have, come on up, as they said on that old television show.
Hi, my name's Gail. I met Paul, I think, back in 2017, 2018. My first year here was in 2017. And Matt had mentioned eclectic, and I looked that up because that's what came to my mind, that he was a very eclectic man. But the first thing that I was impressed with him, and he had a very, very traditional religious background, a long line of priests, nuns, and so forth in his family, which was pretty impressive, but I felt very constraining in my own personal view. But when he said that he got thrown out of the seminary, I went, yeah, he's a rebel. And so I could appreciate that, and it was mentioned being thrusted into this almost, kind of, sort of. But I remember in a private conversation telling him that, well, you know, I was a practicing spiritualist for many years. And he said, oh, yeah. He mentioned, I think it was an uncle or a couple of other family members that were still practicing spiritualists. And so his background was so diverse. He was in the Coast Guard and wore many, many hats. And then there was the story that he told it all the time. I guess he was with the Warrens there with that big investigation there, but he talked about those stick figures and how he could touch those stick figures, and talking about the energy of anger, how it really energized that source or whatever he was investigating. And I always took that away with me, the power of that. But I just going to read eclectic, little definition I came up with. And I think it's very apropos for him. So, deriving ideas, style, or taste from a broad and diverse range of sources in the philosophy, which he certainly was, a philosopher, denoting or belonging to a class of ancient philosophers who do not belong to or found any recognized school of thought, but selected doctrines from various schools of thought. And he was quite a family man. He loved his son and his children. And I loved his little story where he was going to divorce his wife when he was out there in Pennsylvania, when she called on the phone when they were getting close to the source of Bigfoot. It was very tongue-in-cheek. He had that kind of Yankee humor, too. So he will definitely be missed. Thanks.
Okay, we're about to go to lunch break, and I have Mike checking on something. I think there was a transposition in the program, but I'm not sure whether this speaker, Peter Robbins, whoever he is supposed to go next, or Sue Shipe, who has a wonderful presentation. So I'm going to leave it at that and ask you once again to remember we have an amazing now, I have to say, group of raffle prizes. If you haven't purchased any tickets, come on. Even if you're not a gambler, $1 each, 6 for $1, you can be a high roller on this one. And that will be the last item on our agenda this afternoon. We will do the raffle awarding right at the end of the conference. Otherwise, see you back here at 12:30 for one of two speakers.